Hey guys, tonight we drift along the roads. No one brags about mud-soft lanes, hedge-narrow paths, and the quiet edges of towns where lamp smoke thins into stars. You shoulder a threadbare cloak, pockets practical, shoes opinionated, looking for the kind of sleep that doesn't require a key, just permission and a little luck. Church porches breathe cool stone. City gates blink drowsily after curfew. Pilgrim hostels murmur in candle grammar. You learn to read shadows like signs, where wind is gentle, where dogs are philosophical, where the ground forgets to be hard. You probably won't survive this, in the sense that by the third yawn your pillow will stage a coup, and you'll blissfully lose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is. I love seeing the map of midnight and morning fill in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Where did poor travelers sleep at night? You set out when the light is still friendly, and the road pretends it will always be this easy. Your pack has ambitions, your purse has none. You rehearse a little speech in your head for later, something polite and unthreatening about being quiet, clean, and very temporary. You count your assets, a cloak that used to be proud of being waterproof, a staff with opinions, 2 coins with stage fright, and a willingness to sleep anywhere that looks slightly less terrible than the ground you're standing on. Somewhere ahead, in the folds of evening, is your bed. It may be stone, it may be straw, it may be the remarkable luxury of a real mattress if coin and luck collaborate. You walk, and you practice noticing where smoke thins, where dogs bark like they mean it, where the hedgerow makes a shoulder of itself against the wind. Dusk arrives not with trumpets but with a shrug. Somewhere, a bell is realistic about your odds. The fields turn to silhouette maps, the path pulls tighter, and you slip into the work of choosing sleep. You learn it the way you learn to read a river, by listening around the edges. Where does the wind go when the hedge breaks? Which porches keep their dry? Where do footsteps pause without triggering a gossip of shutters? Tonight, you're not looking for comfort as much as you're looking for permission. The faint social yes that lets you leave your weight for a few hours without being hassled. A good night on the road is like a loan you pay back in invisibility. First idea, the church porch. You pass the lich gate, its roof a kind of gesture of respect to the dead, and sometimes the living, and pad up to the nave's great door. The stone holds the day's heat like a tired cat. The porch keeps off the rain with the matter-of-fact kindness of architecture, designed by people who understood weather and ceremony. You stand in the half-light, making nothing sharper than your own breath, and you watch for signs. The broom propped like a border official, the bench worn to a smooth welcome, the chalked marks where market notices clung. You remember how porches double as stages where vows are said, deals are sworn, and gossip clarifies into news. You sit on the outer step first, a polite preview, the way decent travelers do, your hands visible, your voice small and civil if anyone comes. Mainstream fact slips in quietly with the dusk. Church porches across medieval and early modern Europe often function as community rooms. Marriage ceremonies start here, contracts get witnessed here, announcements get posted here, and because they're roofed and central, they occasionally become sleeping spots for the desperate or merely unlucky. A quirky tidbit rides along. Some porches even have built-in stone benches called sedilia, or local nicknames like the beggar's seat, a restraint and a kindness at once. A place where you can be still without being fully inside. Historians still argue whether parish officials turned a formal blind eye to travellers bedding down, or whether it was entirely case by case, the mercy of a beadle with a reasonable mood and a warm supper waiting at home. You arrange your cloak like a treaty between skin and stone, and prepare for the theatre of being harmless. The trick is to be obviously temporary. You don't spread out like a camp, you curl like punctuation. You place your shoes just where your hand can find them, because a shoe that wanders is a shoe that becomes a problem tomorrow. Your staff lies along your shin, not because you want to fight, but because you want the confidence of a sentence that can end in a period, not an ellipsis. If a church warden clears his throat, you are ready to be cheerful, grateful, and gone. Joke 1 arrives to keep you company. You tell yourself you're staying at the Stony Goose Inn, 5-star roof, 0-star mattress, and somehow that makes the bench feel 1 notch softer. Of course, the porch is only good luck if it's there, and if it says yes. Sometimes the door stands sternly under its arch, the porch swept too clean to misunderstand. Sometimes there is a dog that treats thresholds like a profession. Sometimes there is a sign, literal or otherwise, that says not tonight. You practice the non-drama of retreat, and you move on. The road is still talking under your feet, a soft crunch that says next idea. Second idea, the city gate. From a distance, towns look cozy. A ring of wall-hugging buildings like a belt a bit too tight. Roofs pressed together as if sharing jokes. Up close, the gate is a machine for deciding who gets to be inside when the dark goes conversational. You approach with open palms and a face you hope reads inoffensive. Curfew is a real character in your nightly drama. When the bell says cover the fire, the hinges start having opinions. You arrive under the portcullis shadow, and the watchman's eyes, patient with practice, weigh your outline. You repeat your little speech passing through, no trouble, quiet as laundry, 2 coins and a polite exit at dawn. Sometimes the gatehouse has a recessed bench, a bit of roof, and a tolerance for travelers who rid as briefly human. Sometimes the watchman has a bit of straw he's willing to pretend he didn't notice you borrow. Sometimes not inside is the point, but the margin, just under the arch, just outside the official, becomes a little bivouac spot. You accept that you'll sleep with the conversation of hooves and footsteps as a lullaby, and the occasional clank like a chime marking the hours. Mainstream fact sets a lantern on the scene. In many European towns, gates shut at or soon after sunset, and watches walk rounds. The term couvre-feu, cover the fire, becomes curfew over time, a civic management of nighttime risks. Quirk crosses the threshold with a grin. Some gates keep tiny cubby spaces for toll records, charcoal marks ticked by candle stub, and it isn't unheard of for a latecomer to pay a small after-hours consideration in the warmth of a gatehouse where a cat is the real keeper of order. Historians still argue whether curfew was primarily a fire prevention measure, or a convenient tool for policing bodies who didn't have a bed with a door behind it. The answer, as with most human rules, seems to be yes. But maybe the watchman shakes his head, not unkindly, and points outward with 2 fingers and a story about last week's trouble. When gate sleep is a no, you angle toward the liminal places that like company, bridges, ferries, shrines, and if you are lucky, charity. Bridges have their own social life. On the really proud ones, there are chapels perched like thoughtful birds. You find a corner of parapet, where the wind behaves, and you look down at water chewing steadily on the dark. Bridge brotherhoods raise funds to keep the stones sound. A tollman stows his stool, and you tuck yourself near enough to seem near, far enough not to seem a nuisance. The night will tug at you with every change in the river's tone. You sleep with one ear turned to current, one to footsteps. Joke 2 shuffles in with a straw-hatted bow. You call it waterfront property, with infinite amenities, and if laughter isn't warmth, it at least keeps your shoulders from climbing into your ears. Shrines are softer. A wayside image under a little roof gathers the hush of people passing. There might be a shelf where offerings leave the faint sugar smell of wax. There might be a bench worn by knees and stories. You settle at a respectful angle nobody can mistake for irreverence, and let the icon look past you at whatever the sky is up to. You have the sense of borrowing courage from a lot of strangers at once. If fortune expands, if the world decides to be generous and structured at the same time, you find a hospitium, a maison Dieu, a pilgrim shelter. You knock. The door opens with the cautious grace of someone who balances care with caretaking. An almoner looks you over, not unkindly, not naively, and admits you to a bed you will not own, in a hall that exhales boiled herbs and durable broth. There are rules, which are soothing when you're tired. Keep quiet, keep clean, keep the peace. You share a mattress with straw ambitions and wake to a prayer mumbled at a practical hour. Mainstream fact lights a candle by your pillow. Monastic and civic hospitals on major routes gave lodging to travelers, especially the sick and pilgrims, under the authority of almoners and confraternities. Hospitality is written into rules, Benedictine and otherwise, though the interpretation ranges from generous to cautious. Quirk pads in on silent feet. Some houses issue bread tokens or stamped badges as tiny passports for a night's rest. Proof that you're part of an organized kindness, and not just windblown. Historians still argue whether post-plague pressures tightened the welcome, resources strained, strangers feared, or whether the memory of mortality made charity more determined, not less. But most nights don't happen in tidy halls. They happen in the unsettled middle, a barn, a loft, a hedge, the lee of a mill, the friendly side of a ditch. You learn the alphabet of field sleep. The letter A is for avoid the hollow where water forgets to leave. The letter B is for back against something, so surprise has fewer directions. The letter C is for cloak, wrapped twice, once for weather, once for courage. You recognize the safe tones of animals, the thoughtful chew of cattle, the opinionated yip of foxes who do not care about you, the owls whose job description is evening punctuation. If a barn admits you, by negligence or pity, you place your weight on boards that don't complain, you set your pack above mouse ambitions, and you accept the compromise of straw soft at a distance, aggressive in close conversation. Joke 3 rustles up. You think of the hay as a committee interviewing you for the position of temporary lump, and you give your best references. When there's no roof besides sky, you build smaller shelters out of the world. A banked hedge that leans away from the wind is as kind as any landlord. A cart path's raised edge makes a pillow nobody can steal. You tilt your cloak to shed dew like a roof that knows its business, and you keep your feet together, not for elegance, but because warmth is fond of clusters. If you're lucky, the stars are busy. If you're luckier, a cloud does the lullaby work. Often sleep comes not in a sweep, but in installments. A nod, a listen, a curl deeper, another nod. Somewhere between owls, you practice the old human art of segmented sleep, the first sleep that goes out like a candle, and the second sleep that arrives after a small midnight intermission, when you wake, soft-eyed, and let your thoughts stroll a little. Mainstream fact raises a finger here. Historians of sleep have argued that in pre-industrial Europe, biphasic sleep, first and second sleep with a quiet wakening between, was common enough to show up in letters, court records and literature. Quirk peeks in like a cat at the door. Some people keep a little night draught by the bed, weak ale, small beer, or watered wine, to make the middle hours as gentle as the edges. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was universal, or simply one among many patterns people used, depending on the season, their work, and whether the porch dog considered contemplation a suspicious activity. Of course there are inns. There are always inns, large and loud as a blessing, and you approach one with the nervous optimism of a person who has 2 coins and a strong desire to trade them for a roof. The sign creaks in its own dialect. Swan, boar, crown, something cheerful with grapes, and a woman with the briskness of well-run tables lets you know what your money can buy. Sometimes it can buy a shared bed in a room that doesn't shout. Sometimes it can buy a pallet in the common hall where talk continues confidently into the night. Sometimes it can buy the right to spread your own bedding in a corner, and to wake without being swept. You learn to negotiate the currency of quiet. I can keep my boots on, I can keep my boots off, I can snore politely, I can drink gently, I can be up before the rooster reads the liturgy. Joke 4 leans on the bar. You assure your coins that this is an investment in real estate, and if a straw pallet counts, then you are a landlord now. Beds in inns have their own politics. They like to be busy, hot bedding, vacating, when someone else needs the mattress, isn't unusual when traffic is thick and space is stingy. It helps to arrive tired enough that your philosophy of comfort becomes expansive. There's usually a cat running a pest control operation with a contract that includes laps and leftovers. There's usually someone telling a story loud enough to be believed. Your job, make your body small, your sleep gentle, your snore, a rumor. Sometimes your inn is a cottage that sells drink by the jug, and gossip by the sentence. Sometimes it's a farmhouse that trades straw for a coin and a thank you. Hospitality comes in shapes, and you learn to say all the right variations of gratitude. There's charity beyond buildings, a social architecture that's older than mortar. If you knock at the right door with the right softness, a woman might hand you a bowl with a warning about heat. A man might point you to the lean-to and say mind the saw, without saying leave early. You become good at paying back without coin. You leave the place as clean as when you found it. Or better, you cut kindling small and tidy. You fix a loose peg. You turn your thanks into a little bit of labor that says I understood the gift. If you are given a place near the hearth, you sleep not just under a roof but inside a moment of collective warmth. Voices, spoons, the certain percussion of a wooden chair being dragged precisely where it was meant to be. But many nights belong to the road's extremes, ferry landings where the wind collects uselessly, mills whose wheels mutter all night, orchards that smell like someone else's memories. You learn the weather's trivia, the way a sailor learns currents, where dew is ambitious, where fog is gossip, where frost starts at the toes and works upward. A good cloak is not a luxury, but infrastructure. If it's well-fulled wool, it does the quiet, serious work of shedding wet and holding warmth. You tuck your hands where wrists meet ribs and let breath be your central heating, slow and steady, learned from cattle, who know how to winter, and sparrows, who know how to be bigger than they look. You keep safety like a candle you shield with your palm. The rules are small and specific. Always sleep with your pack in contact, so the first question your body asks in the dark gets a comforting answer. Always choose a place with a back, so mystery is reduced to a manageable number of directions. Never sleep where footsteps converge, because paths are for moving, not for becoming furniture. You practice dog diplomacy with crumbs and gentle syllables. You practice human diplomacy with your own face arranged in the kind of kindness you mean to receive. Your staff stays a piece of wood, not a declaration. Your voice stays low, even when your heart rehearses louder. When you're very lucky, a road companion appears at the hour when the sky can't decide whether it is pewter or velvet. Travelers like you make alliances of exhaustion. 2. Keep watch by sleeping in turns without saying so, a kind of choreography that respects the common desire to tomorrow. You share bread that insists it used to be stone and cheese that believes it will be cheese forever. You trade tiny biographies with the precision of people who know the price of words. Perhaps you swap badges, a pilgrim scallop for a cross from a local shrine, or you exchange directions that are less a map and more a story. Walk until the oak that looks like a startled man, and then the road turns as if it remembered something. There are bad nights, best to mention them softly, to run a finger over them like a scar, and then not pick at it. There are nights when the wind sharpens into complaint, when the shelter says no, when kindness fails at the exact moment, need is most articulate. On those nights, your body surprises you with competence. You become a series of good decisions, a connoisseur of slightly better. This hedge, not that, this angle to the breeze, this stone as pillow, shaped by somebody else's earlier choosing. You promise your own bones you'll be wiser tomorrow, and you are. The morning arrives as a rumor, and then as a glow that makes the world confess its shapes. You stretch without broadcasting it. You check your shoes for creatures with opinions. You rehearse your thanks whether anyone hears it or not. You look back at where your weight just was, and you fix it. Brush a mark, straighten a straw, wipe the sleep from a place as if it were a face. You walk with the particular energy of someone who just became once again a person in daylight, rather than a clever arrangement of blankets and willpower. Another night, another town, another kind of yes. This time a charity bed in a parish house. The alms clerk counts on his fingers and nods. He hands you a wooden token with a little mark burned in, and you exchange it for a bowl that smells like sensible vegetables, for a bed whose squeak is at least predictable. You share the space with a pilgrim who took bad advice from his shoes, and a widow who stares at the ceiling with the thoughtful calm of a person who has had longer conversations with loss than you have had with sleep. You fall into talk because humans do, of roads and roofs, of saints who might be paying attention, of relatives who always mean well, and of purses that rarely do. Someone's story is wild enough to be true, and for a minute you forget how thin your cloak is. Midnight becomes a hallway you walk through without noticing the doors. You sleep a sleep so sudden, it counts as a magic trick. When hospitality is organized, the night holds different. A brother recites rules like a lullaby, and says them softer the second time, as if reading your face more than the handbook. A sister places your bowl on the table with an extra piece of bread because no one is only one hunger. If you make it plain that you are not sick, just poor, the bed might still become yours for a night on the grounds that traveling is often a condition, not a diagnosis. In some places, travelers are expected to contribute a small core at dawn. You lift, sweep, carry, count. Work reminds you there is a price to everything. Work also reminds you that you know how to pay. Mainstream fact toddles in with a ledger and a smile. Confraternities and guilds sometimes fund almshouses and shelters, with a quota of beds for strangers and poor wayfarers. And records survive with entries that are beautifully boringly specific. Half loaves, measures of ale, nights counted and names slanting across the page. Quirk winks from a margin. In a few towns, the rustle of rushes is not just poetic. Floors are strewn with fresh-cut reeds or rushes scented with herbs, a kind of medieval carpet that doubles as a yearly calendar of chores. Historians still argue whether the scenting was mainly a practical bug discouragement, a status perfuming, or simply one of those human gestures that tries to make common life a fraction lovelier than it needs to be. Some nights, the answer is work for it. You reach a farm at the hour when the light is a polite question. You ask if there's a corner in the barn, and the farmer asks if there's a corner of you capable of lifting, raking or not making a mess. You become suddenly capable. You hand-turn earth until your shoulders are paragraphs of warm complaint. You haul water until you know each bucket by the exact weight of its stubbornness. Payment comes in forms more delicious than coin. A wooden spoon, a bowl rubbed with garlic and memory, bread that remembers a morning you didn't see, a truss of straw and the permission to sink into it like gratitude itself. You sleep the way tools sleep, competently, without drama, ready to be picked up by a gentle hand. On rare nights, the best bed is an absence of bed. You end up under a tree so old it contains advice. The ground is a compromise between roots and comfort, which is exactly the kind of bargain you're good at closing. The night has so many small sounds you feel the outline of the world in your ears. Leaves practicing their thesis on wind, a moth fumbling toward a story about light, a fox telling a joke to itself, and laughing at exactly the right time. Joke 5 curls up at your feet. You grant your cloak an honorary degree in architecture for its ability to be both roof and wall with such confidence, and so few materials. Night after night teaches you what roofs teach, that shelter is as much manners as material. You become a scholar of thresholds, a professional appreciator of overhangs. You know the difference between you may and you can try. You develop a tiny, precise generosity for other travelers. You trade information like recipes. You share a corner with a stranger as if the bed is a borderless map, and you are both careful cartographers. Sometimes you sing very quietly to yourself when the dark has opinions, and you need to have more convincing ones. Sometimes you count stars, breaths, blessings, the number of nights since you slept in a bed that belonged to a room that belonged to a house that belonged to a person who knew your name. The counting doesn't make anything happen. It makes happening feel like a story, and stories are beds you can carry. Where did poor travelers sleep at night? They slept where permission met possibility. Church porches that offered a sketched-in roof to those who knew how to be small. City gates with watchmen who could read a face faster than a passport. Bridge chapels, and wayside shrines that believed in pauses. Monasteries, hospitals, and almshouses that turned a rule into a room. Barns and lofts and hedges, wherever straw and patience could be persuaded to be cousins. They slept in common rooms, where snores were a chorus and stories a currency. They slept under skies that did not mind a body arranged like punctuation. They slept inside kindnesses and outside refusals. Mostly, they slept well enough to walk tomorrow. And you tonight, you feel the language of roofs settling into your bones. You adjust your cloak one more time. Check the old choreography. Boots, pack, staff, hands. Close your eyes and practice the first sentence of a dream you'll forget on purpose.
The bench holds your weight with the slow approval of stone. The wind loses interest in being theatrical. The night, persuaded, folds around you like a blanket fresh from the line. You sleep, not as a guest of one building or one town, but as a citizen of the long road, who knows the secret every traveler learns, that beds are temporary, but knowing how to find one is permanent.
Church porches and charity beds. You arrive at the hour when the church learns the names of the wind. The lane funnels you toward stone the way rivers funnel toward the sea, and there it is, a low lich gate with its wooden roof, hatched like a careful eyebrow. A gate that opens the way people open a book, reluctant at first, then suddenly generous. You slip through, and the grass underfoot is short, like manners, cropped by sheep who consider this an annex of their dining room. The porch waits, a pocket of twilight tucked into masonry, wide enough to keep a promise, shallow enough that nobody can pretend it's a room. Your feet make that hollow sound that stone keeps for itself, and the evening does its trick of making edges crisp and thoughts soft. You pause just outside the arch because thresholds like being respected. There is a stoop by the door, its lip smoothed by more fingers than memory could count. You brush yours over it in the modest choreography of people who try to be on good terms with places. The door iron glimmers like the idea of stars. From somewhere beyond, a bell tests its voice, and then gives up, satisfied that it can still sing tomorrow. You listen to the sky for rain rumors, and to the hedges for dog diplomacy. There's a bench along the porch wall, stone masquerading as furniture, and you introduce your tiredness to it with the careful weight of a person asking a favor. First joke sidles in to keep your shoulders loose. You tell yourself you're checking into the Stony Goose, famous for its minimalist interior design and aggressively honest mattresses. The bench doesn't laugh, but it becomes 1 degree kinder. You're not the first to arrive like this. The porch holds echoes, and you stroke them as you find your spot. Here is where a couple months ago exchanged vows while relatives quietly audited the guest list with their eyes. Here is where a Reeve and a Miller argued grain standards until the bench disagreed and creaked. Here is where someone posted a notice, and someone else added a comment in the universal handwriting of chalk. You sense a universe of small, public, decent errands done under this roof. Mainstream fact pads in, unobtrusive as a verdure across medieval Europe, especially in England. The church porch is civic as much as sacred. Marriages begin here. Contracts get witnessed here. Deals are nodded into existence where the font of daylight meets the threshold of the nave. Records from parishes show porches used for business that prefers a roof, but not quite a sanctuary. Quirky tidbit peers from a corner carving. Some porches feature a built-in stone bench or sedilia, and a few have a little table. The bishop's stone, the beggar's seat, local names sprouting like ivy. Where bread is portioned during doles, where the public arithmetic of kindness takes place. Historians still argue whether porches served as semi-official shelters for wayfarers, or whether the kindness was purely informal, hinged on the mood of a beadle, and whether the broom had been freshly leaned in a discouraging angle. You turn your back to the wind, and practice the art of being clearly temporary. Cloak folded, not flung, staff parallel to your shin like a line under a sentence. Pack under your knees so the first question at midnight, still there, has a reassuring answer. You keep your shoes within reach because shoes are philosophers about wandering if left to contemplate the world on their own. A cat arrives from the graveyard with the confident gait of a creature that thinks in straight lines. You exchange biographies in glances and settle into non-interference. The cat approves the bench. This is naturally an excellent review. You let sight loosen into scent and sound. Cold stone smells like surviving rain and very old whispers. Beeswax breath lingers from a candle someone shielded to bed. Your palm remembers the tiny grit of pumice on the doorway where someone scrubbed away chalk last week. Barn owls begin their pale patrols, each wing beat a polite signature on the air. Your head, which has been filing all day like a clerk, lays down its pen. Second joke. Because the night likes company. You promise yourself you're sleeping on the right side of history, which here means the side with a roof. You think about why the porch feels more permission than trespass. It's a public-private, like a pocket in a coat owned by everyone. Nobody lives here, but everybody uses here. You can imagine a church warden, with a key the size of a respectable fish, stepping out, seeing your careful arrangement, and deciding to let the night do the disciplining. A different warden, a different mood, and you'd be waved along with a firm word and a direction to try the tithe barn, the bridge, or the mill with the broken board. You inventory the porch like a small museum. There are stone friezes of saints who stare at the middle distance with the committed concentration of people listening to sermons no one else can hear. There is a low side window, shuttered, and you consider all the things it has been accused of being. Mainstream debate wanders in like a polite argument. Historians still argue whether these low side windows, sometimes called leper windows, let people hear the mass from outside, provided a way to ring a sanctus bell, cooled and cleared the air for the altar candles, or served as practical confession slots for scandal that preferred never to cross a threshold. You do not solve the question. You award the window a tie for versatility and thank it for admitting small curious breezes. The porch is also an archive of doles. You trace a groove in the stone ledge and imagine coins counted with the brisk mercy of practice, bread divided by a sister whose hands know the measurement called hungry. Quirky tidbit kicks happily, in a handful of places, still murmured about centuries later. The dole is formalized into ritual, like the wayfarer's dole at a certain old hospital, a sip and a piece of bread for any traveler. Whether or not you're at that very gate tonight, the idea travels like rumor, and does the good work of making you feel less ghostly. You breathe, and the night shrinks to your size. Sleep arrives in installments. First a little nod like a courtesy, then a deeper slide as the bench admits your outline. A pause when a fox laughs at its own joke, and you must respect it by listening. Then the long corridor where dreams lean on each other. You practice segmented sleep like an ancient tune your body remembers, without remembering it learned. Somewhere between the first and second act, you wake just enough to hear rain negotiate with the porch roof, decide they are friends, and fall again. Toward midnight, the village considers whether to turn over. Footsteps pass, polite in their own way. A late man takes off his cap to the dark, as if it were an elder. A watchman's staff clicks once, twice, the punctuation of a sentence that has already been said. Your hand finds the smooth curve of your staff reflexively, and then forgets it, reassured. You are a punctuation mark yourself, comma-shaped, well-placed, encouraging the sentence to keep going. Morning edits the world with a pale pencil. The damp has opinions but not decisive ones. You reach for your shoes with the automatic grace of a person who slept responsibly in unfamiliar company, check that your pack weighs like itself, and perform porch cleaning like a micro-ritual. Brush crumbs that do not exist, straighten air that is already straight. Thank the bench without saying anything embarrassing out loud. You leave exactly as much of yourself as a cat hair and no more. Breakfast is the idea of breakfast, that's enough. You step back through the lich gate, and pause because gates like to be paused at. The yew trees have been old for so long that their age doesn't feel like a number but a weather pattern. You breathe their resin, which smells like some grandmother advice you will understand in 20 years, and you join the road with the modest pride of someone who got a night for free, and intends to repay it, by being someone easy to host next time. The day happens. Feet happen, which is to say you repeat the miracle of forward. Fields do their best impressions of tablecloths. The sun, not unkind but definitely managerial, decides what you will think about water, shade, the difference between good tired, and why did I think this was a plan. By evening, another parish steeple arranges itself where the lane narrows, and you angle toward it because habits become wisdom when they work twice. You arrive sooner than your hunger, which is ideal, because asking for a roof with a full mouth is ambitious. This porch is different, deeper, with a screen of oak carved into the idea of leaves, a little niche where someone has tucked a votive that smells like bees arguing nicely. You repeat your threshold manners. A woman with the key walks by, her skirt says brisk, her hands say busy, her eyes say she knows 1,000 kinds of tired. You make yourself small polite. She nods,
The kind of nod that says I have seen this before, which is the kind of nod that gets you a bed, even when the bed is technically a bench. Because this night, you aim for something more than stone. You mention as lightly as one mentions the weather, that you heard a whisper of charity beds at the parish house. Her eyebrow does an entire conversation with itself, and then she tells you where to knock. You knock like a person who wants to sleep without becoming someone else's chore. The door opens. The room behind is house-shaped, long table, shelf of bowls, broom that has opinions about corners. A man with the ledger face of a church warden asks your name, your destination, whether your shoes will mutiny if left unguarded. You answer in small durable truths. He counts on his fingers and then breaks his own rhythm to fetch a token, a little disc of wood burned with a mark. He explains the rules in a tone that has practiced being kind without being foolish. Quiet after the candle is capped, your corner is yours, and not bigger than your corner. You leave at first bell unless someone is sicker than you. Second joke flickers. You promise to snore in the key of G, an easy pastoral. Mainstream fact sets a bowl on the table with satisfying weight. Parishes, confraternities and hospitals across late medieval and early modern towns maintain charity beds, or short lodgings for the poor and wayfarers. Overseen by church wardens, almoners, or guild-appointed visitors, these beds appear in account books with the bland specificity of kindness measured. So many loaves, so many nights, candles counted to the stub. Quirky tidbit warms its hands at the hearth. In some foundations, admitted bedesmen or biddieswomen wear blue gowns and promise daily prayers in return for lodging and sustenance, turning charity into a small dignified contract. Historians still argue whether such charity preferred locals to wanderers, whether statutes that mention strangers aimed to include travelers like you, or to discourage them in practice. Hospitality stretched between piety and the tidy preferences of settled budgets. Your token buys you a pallet stuffed with straw that used to be agricultural and is now philosophical. The room smells like boiled things, herbs, onions, a theory of cabbage. A sister, whose hands know how to lift more than the bowl, shows you where to wash, and returns with a piece of bread that believes in you and a scoop of something that used to be vegetables before they decided to become comfort. You eat with the seriousness of ritual and the speed of grateful animals. The charity bed is not just a bed, it's a script everybody knows. Someone coughs like a metronome. Someone else prays like a whisper practicing to be weather. A pilgrim rearranges his blister logic. A widow smooths her skirt as if smoothing her whole life must be possible with enough passes. You both look at the ceiling beams that do such reliable work, and whatever prayers you know, you lay them across the wood in parallel. After the bowl returns to the shelf, after the broom has the last word, the almoner recites house rules again, because rules make sleep less lonely. Lights, such as they are, dim. This bed is the opposite of the porch, and yet kin to it, a public-private, a space made by people in agreement. You translate yourself from upright citizen to horizontal gratitude, and fall into the sort of sleep that starts in your feet and rises like actual bread. You have a short intermission after midnight, because centuries of humans before you invented it, and you are traditional when it matters. You sit up just enough to sip a little watered ale from the cup they left you, small beer that tastes like someone solved a math problem about thirst. Mainstream fact pulls up a bench. In many medieval towns and houses, weak ale or small beer is the daytime and nighttime drink of choice. Safer than raw water, and kinder than strong brew. It shows up in rations and house accounts so routinely it barely counts as a beverage, more like liquid bread. Quirky tidbit, elbows inamiably, some almshouses lay out night draughts on a ledge by the door, each cup marked with a notch, so that even in the dark hands find the right kindness. Historians still argue whether feigned generosity at certain houses grew stricter after plague years and statutes of labourers, becoming less open to travellers, and more focused on settled poor, or whether the memory of loss kept the doors pointedly ajar despite new paperwork. You nest back into straw that has decided to be supporting rather than opinionated. Your neighbour's breathing finds a tempo your body thinks is about weather. You slide away, dawn scratches at the window with a small twig. Everyone wakes in the order of their obligations. First the person with livestock somewhere, then the person with sorrow, then you, who have miles. You help stack pallets, you sweep where sweeping obviously wishes to happen, you carry a bucket the way a good sentence carries its own weight. In exchange, the sister adds a second scrap of bread to your bowl without mentioning it, which is the kind of charity that feels like being seen rather than being measured. Third joke loosens your jaw. You tell the sister you're ready to repay the house by not being here this evening. She laughs in the register of someone who has heard 30 variations of that and liked 27. You leave a thank you arranged into the world, a neatly piled kindling bundle near the hearth, a door lintel wiped dry of night's breath, the bench in the porch brushed with your palm as if posing it for a portrait. The warden marks your name and your token, and something like your destination in a ledger that will eventually join a stack of paper that is essentially a poem about people who passed through and went on. The road resumes, 12 miles later, or 3, or 6, because distances shrink and swell depending on whose feet count them. Another church, another porch, another possibility. This one smells of lime wash and bees, and the faint peppery memory of incense. The nave door is shut, and as emphatic as a shut book, but the porch keeps its open parenthesis. You settle with the competence of someone who knows how to fit a body into a corner without startling the corner. A boy appears with a broom half his height, and the seriousness twice his age. He eyes you with the professional curiosity of someone who has been told to notice when new things appear. You arrange your smile to be majority harmless. He nods toward a box with 3 locks. One for the parson, one for the churchwardens, one for nobody knows because mystery is important, and taps it with the broom as if to save funds. You nod back, and he performs a sweeping flourish fully worthy of a minor saint of tidiness. Mainstream fact leans in with its ledger again. Church alms chests often had multiple locks so that no one person could open them and be accused of generosity with other people's generosity. Parish accounts list distributions for poor at the door, for wayfaring men, for strangers. Quirky tidbit flickers from the corner of the porch roof. Swallow nests under the beams are tolerated, as if the birds paid rent in joy. Sometimes a bit of plaster below is intentionally left rough, a sacrificial splatter zone that saves the carved saints from indignities. Historians still argue whether parish relief before the codified poor laws operated mainly on neighborly discretion, or according to informal but strict criteria of deservingness, a doctrine of the deserving poor, tightening like a belt over centuries. Evenings braid into each other, porch nights when you borrow the sky's patience, charity bed nights when you borrow a house's rules. You begin to sense how charity isn't a basket of bread so much as a choreography. Somebody rings the bell, somebody ladles the stew, somebody guards the mattresses from becoming theories about private property, somebody keeps the book where names lie down in ink for the night, and then walk on in the morning. One town, a merchant endows a bed for poor strangers, because his son survived a fever in a far place, and memory is a bridge that loves being walked both ways. Another, the Guild of Cordwainers funds a little almshouse long enough to be old in its own right. The residents wear blue gowns and walk in a gentle line to prayers, their steps setting the village clock more reliably than the town. You watch them with the respectful envy we reserve for people who have won the lottery called routine. Fourth joke taps politely. You apply to be temporary bedsman for the evening. Benefits package includes a roof and a hymn. Your application is warmly received and carefully filed under Not How It Works. Not every porch is equally persuasive. One has a broom so strategically placed it might as well be an essay on property. Another hosts a rooster with managerial ambitions who treats your presence as an unfilled form and herds you to the margin. Yet another offers a bench so smooth, it seems someone carved it with the same tools that made the font. You accept refusals the way you accept weather, gently with plan B already making a face in the background. Once rain winds around. The porch is full, 2 other travelers curled like punctuation marks you would not disturb. You step out, tilt your cloak, and let the lich gate be your roof. It serves heroically, until the wind decides to moonlight as a water carrier. The sexton, who has watched weather longer than both of you have been taking it personally, mutters, then gestures toward the tithe barn. It smells like a combination of negative and positive adjectives: damp, generous, mouse hay, history. You tuck yourself between bales the way a note tucks between lines on a stave. This is not technically a charity bed, but the effect is identical. Someone said yes, and you repeated it with your whole spine. Another evening, a sister at the house of charity counts pallets and sees none left. She frowns in a useful way and considers the apothecary room. There is a spare pallet there, and you are not currently generating consumable quantities of cough, so you are invited to be a bottle for the night. You fall asleep under shelves of jars labeled in a handwriting that could make Time and Treacle feel proud of themselves. You dream lucidly of being cured of tiredness, which is one of those self-fulfilling prescriptions. The long shape of the road means your memories of porches become a catalogue you can recite to yourself like a lullaby. The shallow porch where the threshold dipped as if the church were nodding. The deep porch with the old alms board nailed to its wall, painted with names that are now simply a colour. The porch where a child, brave and curious, offered you a raisin like a treaty, and then ran away without collecting your gratitude, which seemed on reflection the most advanced form of generosity. You keep a private list of rules for porch sleepers and bed borrowers. Rule 1. Look like you plan to leave in the morning, and then do so. Rule 2. Do not make noise bigger than the bell. Rule 3. Do not mistake charity for something owed. Answer it with maintenance, a swept step, a straightened broom, the absence of trouble. Rule 4. Never sleep where carts must be carts, or where doors must be doors. Do not turn function into furniture. Rule 5. When someone says a reluctant yes, treat it like a yes, given cheerfully. Your behavior can rewrite the original tone. Fifth joke arrives like a small yawn. You add a corollary. Always keep one joke warm in your pocket in case a dog, a beetle, or your own heart needs to be distracted for 30 seconds. As months fold their pages, the landscape of charity grows more legible. In towns the parish and the guild and the hospital braid their strands, a coin here, a pallet there, a loaf and a ladle of small beer, when someone has the extra. In villages, charity is often a face. This widow, who keeps a pot perpetually on the boil, that reeve who lets the church key linger in his hand a fraction longer on a wet evening. The sexton who knows which families' porch dogs are philosophers and which are lawyers. Mainstream fact steps down from the belfry. Over time, especially by the early 17th century in England, the parish poor law turns many of these customs into policy, setting overseers to gather funds and to spend them on impotent poor, while disciplining those labelled idle. Settlements and certificates make their elaborate appearance, determining who belongs where, and the price of mobility in signatures. Quirky tidbit wanders up with a blue coat. In some places the poor who receive regular relief wear specific gowns, sometimes literally blue coats, and process to church in a way that looks from one angle like dignity, and from another like accounting. Historians still argue whether the poor law system stabilized kindness or bureaucratized suspicion, whether it helped lifetimes or only helped ledgers, whether its beds were wider than its definitions of deserving. For you, definitions are boiled down to nightly practice. The porch offers a bench, you say thank you. The parish house offers a pallet, you say thank you and also sweep. Both together stitch a road through the dark, a road made of human agreements rather than stones. The map you keep is not ink and margins, but doors and thresholds, and the angle at which a broom leans. Your favourite night is small, and can be carried in a pocket. A country church on a rain-stopped evening, the porch smelling faintly of time because someone wove a sprig into the rush mat last festival, and scents last longer than intentions. A sister passes, and seeing you detours inside, emerging moments later with a heel of bread and a tiny cup. She doesn't say it's the dough, she doesn't need to. You eat slowly, because speed feels disrespectful to time that was spent on your behalf. You leave the cup where it will be found by the right hands. You breathe a thank you that could be a prayer or a good habit. The stone under you becomes more than stone. It becomes a sentence the town writes that includes your name for a few hours. What you learn is not merely where to sleep, but how to sleep in human company without unlearning your own edges. A porch is mercy that prefers to stay vague. A charity bed is mercy that prefers to be written down. You begin the night asking for one, and when possible, end it with the other. Between the two, you are protected from your worst self, the version that would let tiredness turn into carelessness. You do not become careless. You become good at a small, pervasive kind of civility that anyone can afford, and that pays an interest more reliable than coin. By the time the season tilts, and the evenings arrive wearing a faster shade of blue, you have a doctrine. Roofs are agreements, beds are promises. The porch agrees to keep off the rain. You promise to take up only as much space as the life of a comma. The parish agrees to lend a mattress that has already met 1,000 names. You promise to return it richer by one story and poorer by one crumb. The ledger will remember you as a line with two short words, one night. You will remember it as the kindness that made tomorrow possible, which in the accounting of travellers is wealth beyond arithmetic. You linger at one last porch, as though you could bottle it. The carven oak smells faintly of honey, the stone holds the day. The cat returns for an inspection, accepts your existence, and performs the timeless audit of needing. The sister passes, nods, the sexton coughs, the church swallows light. The bell rehearses the hour, and decides to let it pass quietly. You tuck your cape, you murmur your pocketed joke to lighten the last of the day's heft, and you tip your head back just enough to see how the roof frames a square of sky. It is enough sky. That's the secret porches teach. A framed piece of heaven is still heaven, and can be borrowed for the price of good behavior. Sleep now finds you not as a collapse but as an agreement reaching its signature. The bench remembers your weight, and is pleased to repeat the hospitality. The rules remember you and lower their voices to a whisper. The town breathes as one slow animal with you in it rather than outside it. You are part of the inventory that gets counted without being confiscated. Cat, bench, wind, you. Your eyes close not because you are defeated by night, but because night has offered a bed, and you have offered back your best version of being a guest. When you wake, because you will be gentle with the hinge, careful with the broom, a little reverent with the stop, friendly with the ledger if it appears. You will leave the porch, looking as if it dreamed you instead of housed you. You will walk away carrying less weight in the pack and more in the chest, which is, contrary to arithmetic, the lightest way to travel. And somewhere tonight or in 20 nights, a stranger will sit where you sit and feel the bencher's faint instruction. Keep small, keep kind, keep moving. The porch will remember how to say yes. The charity bed will remember how to be a promise. And you will remember, having slept here, that history, for all its loudness, contains more quiet roofs than wars.
City gates after curfew. You reach the town when the sky is already fastening its last buttons, the sort of blue that decides whether it wants to be indigo or just brag about it. The road narrows, gets shy, and then presents you with geometry. Towers like blunt pencils, battlements like careful teeth. A gatehouse shouldering the street as if architecture has opinions about who counts as inside. You feel the road's story pause. The wall has the final line. The gate waits to see if you can pronounce it. You slow down because nothing good happens quickly after curfew. Your feet have been writing a long sentence across the day. Now the punctuation looms, portcullis, a gridded comma that can become a period without warning. The bell has already done its practical poetry, that cover the fire announcement the town makes to itself. Bank the coals, count the children, quit pretending the dark is an optional setting. You arrive in the thin moment after official kindness hangs up its apron, and before the night watch has fully remembered it is supposed to be stern. You breathe, make your hands visible. No one trusts pockets this late, and rehearse a face that says inoffensive with a specialization in brief. The gatehouse smells like decisions, tar from the hinges, old smoke, damp straw committing to its career. There's a bench tucked into the recess where the wall goes from ambition to thickness. On it a halberd leans at parade rest and a lantern sulks in a tin sconce punching a small hole in the evening. Somewhere above, a cat enters into delicate contract negotiations with a pigeon that would prefer to be a rumour. Your eyes rise to the murder hole with the respect reserved for gravity and custom. You put your staff where staffs go when they are expressing good intentions, low along your leg, with the suggestion that it is essentially a very long shy finger. When the watchman appears, he is exactly as real as every night's watchman has ever felt, a man whose cloak has learned Rain's dialect, whose beard has seen most human moods, and whose boots tell you that cobbles and he are on speaking terms. He looks at your face with the professional curiosity of someone who grants or denies tomorrow. You slip into your small, well-practiced speech. You're passing through, your purse is not about to audition for theatre, your sleep is quiet, your dawn is early, your appreciation, should it be allowed, is large. He considers because consideration is part of the job. You do not tap your foot, because impatience at a city gate is the sport of people who enjoy losing. You let the lantern carve you into harmlessness. You say where you came from, and you make it specific, past the mill with the missing plank, beyond the cross where the hawthorn pretends to be a mother hen. You say where you're going, and you make it plausible. So many miles tomorrow, if blisters behave, and a market where you might be able to exchange ambition for bread. Sometimes that is enough, and the evening pragmatism of towns takes over. The watchman tilts his head to the inner bench, the dry stripe where the roof strip line politely gives up. Not inside, he says, because rules like hearing themselves, but under. You nod as if accepting a seat at a very exclusive club. The threshold, members only, dues payable in silence. You fit yourself into the angle of wall and arch with the competence that comes from many nights of not being the main character on purpose. The lantern makes a small stage of your corner, and you practice the art of being scenery. Mainstream fact strolls up in workman's boots and hangs its hat by the door. In many medieval and early modern towns across Europe, gates closed at or soon after sunset. Curfew, curfew, cover the fire, was as much about managing flames as about managing bodies in streets. Watchmen took their rounds, and latecomers negotiated entry with varying success. Night watches grew teeth in statutes and city ordinances. In England, for instance, watch and ward had legal shape by the late 13th century, and in plenty of places, the gatehouse was a little bureaucracy of toll notices, chalk marks, and the memory of who paid what. Quirky tidbit wave salutes from the archstones. Some gates bristled with charms of habit and hardware, great beast-faced knockers that were part doorbell, part theatre, lion heads meant to frighten evil, and incidentally, impress neighbours. Chalk lines where tallies climbed the wall like vines for market days and tax moments. Historians still argue whether curfew was mostly a simple safety measure, or a convenient instrument for regulating the poor and the restless at night. As usual, the answer weaves together fire, fear, order, and the human fondness for schedules. You settle your kit with the delicacy of a person arranging a still life that intends to wake up intact. Boots within reach, pack under your knees, staff like a dozing cat. Joke 1 curls up with you. You consider writing a traveler's guidebook called 1-Star Shelters of Europe, and you contemplate giving the North Gate 3 stars for roof integrity and 1 star for ambience, deducting points for the occasional pigeon editorial. Wind plays scales on the arch. Hoofbeats move past like punctuation marks. You can tell by sound who is walking with a plan and who is walking with a story they are still editing. The watchman trades remarks with a colleague disappearing along the wall walk, and each syllable feels like a rung on a ladder you don't need to climb. Somewhere deeper inside the town a door thumps twice, and several small dogs write letters of concern to the universe. You keep your body language meticulously brief. After curfew, the town is a theatre of suspicion and practical kindness, and your job is to be a prop that suggests peaceful commerce rather than tomorrow's excuse. You set your breathing to the lantern's faint hiss. You watch how the light turns the portcullis bars into neat little shadows on the ground, a checkerboard laid over cobbles. You make a pillow of your rolled cloak, because bedding that does not require permission is the best bedding. A moth visits the lantern, and decides against larger decisions. The world roots for you quietly. Sometimes, though, the answer at the gate is no, and the no is not personal. It is merely well-trained. The watchman tightens his mouth in the shape of regulations, and mentions incidents in a tone that suggests plural. There was a brawl 2 weeks ago. A cart lost a wheel at the exact wrong moment. A traveling juggler thought the law of gravity didn't apply to plates. Tonight your harmless face is not enough to balance the ledger. He points outward, not rudely, not kindly, just like a human signpost, and indicates options. The bridge if wind is shy, the roadside shrine 2 bowshots away, the milltail race where the noise will put you to sleep and then wake you again in cycles like the world breathing. Out you go, and the arch becomes a frame around the knowledge that inside has rules and outside has weather. You accept the demotion. The gravel under your boots says sensible things. This is not a story about rejection. This is a story about Plan B, which if you're honest you quite like because Plan B is where your competence shines casually, without making a fuss. You follow the line of the wall because walls are the kind of friend who may not invite you in but will still walk with you a while. When the gatehouse does say yes, it says it in small gestures, a bench angled away from drafts, a straw twist that was definitely not placed there by accident, a cup that might not have been there a minute ago. You make yourself into a low-maintenance guest of the arch. You watch the watchman mark something in a narrow book, licking the pencil to appease a superstition of graphite. You keep your eyes from climbing the wall to the slot where boiling things might once have been poured in somebody's favorite story. You resist the urge to ask for the cat's name. Night drifts in around the gate with the practiced elegance of old fabric. You can make out the crenellations above as a tidy row of thoughts. You let your own thoughts stack like that, simple, even unassailable by wind. You tell your bones the mattress is historical, which is to say thin but important. Joke 2 shoulders in helpfully. You nominate the portcullis for best grid in an imaginary awards show. The lantern wins best supporting flicker. Mainstream fact leans its elbows on the sill. Towns often collected late fees or special tolls for after-hours entry, and gatekeepers had the discretion to open for merchants with perishables, or for folks who knew someone who knew someone. The watch was not always a uniformed parade. Sometimes it was neighbors conscripted on a rota, men with household hats and borrowed halberds, whose authority was substantial mainly because everyone agreed to pretend it was. Quirky tidbit tickles the ear. In several places, lantern laws obliged night walkers to carry lights and sometimes to limit their weapons to lengths that could be politely measured. A man with too long knife and no candle might be advised to trim one and light the other. Historians still argue whether these ordinances genuinely made nights safer, or mostly offered the authorities an excuse to sort citizens into categories of fine paying. Cities are after all very old machines for turning rules into money and back again. You promise the gate your smallest possible footprint. If you must cough, you will do so apologetically, and in a key flattering to stone. You let your mind wander in straight, slow lines, how the gate depends on the wall, how the wall depends on the town, how the town depends on the road, and how, paradoxically, the road depends on the gate. Without someone to say pause, nothing feels like arriving. You almost fall asleep on that thought, which is exactly the kind of respectable philosophy that should come with a blanket. Footsteps. 2 of them, then 4 boots and a barrow wheel, and the sigh of someone to whom time has been impolite. A baker's assistant with flour in his eyebrows presents arguments for being let in before the bread makes a mockery of the morning. The watchman holds a very thorough conversation with the basket, which to be fair is the real petitioner here. The basket wins. The assistant squeezes past with that guiltless speed reserved for honest emergencies. You tuck your toes out of the way graciously and gain, in exchange, a waft of future breakfast that could bring someone to tears if they were less busy sleeping. You will sleep, but not in a single uninterrupted poem. After midnight the town shifts. Somewhere a shutter slaps and then thinks better. The cat returns for a status update. Your body practices segmented sleep like a language it learned before it learned embarrassment. You wake, sip from your flask in a ceremony that feels older than politics, and settle again. The arch acts like a hand cupped around a candle you can't even see. There are other nights when the gate does more than lend shelter. It becomes a temporary society of late arrivals. A carter from the next parish arrives. swearing allegiance to the concept of beds. A widow with a bundle sits with a dignity that makes everyone else feel like they should straighten their spines. A peddler with bells that he has kindly muted for the evening spreads his cloak and, with impressive diplomacy, negotiates the border between space and not your space. You share the bench in slices of time, and a generosity that doesn't require words. Joke 3 winks at this ad hoc community. You christen your corner the Inn of the Unsmiling Gatekeeper, and you designate yourself Assistant Manager of Silence. Events, because nights insist on them, occasionally spill a little drama into your arch. A young man with beer courage and a late idea tries to barrel inside. The watchman, who has seen the full museum of beer courage, declines to exhibit any astonishment. There is a conversation consisting mostly of pauses. It ends with the young man discovering the subtle art of sleeping against a wall and of waking in the morning convinced that stone is a persuasive teacher. You learn from his example without needing to repeat the lesson, which is the best kind of learning. Long before the war of clocks and coffee, before gaslight and timetables, and the fossil fuel hour that thinks midnight is a suggestion, cities had this choreography. Day pulls in, night pushes out, and the gate conducts the handoff. You are the baton passed quietly, and you understand your role is to be graceful, aerodynamic, not to poke anyone in the eye. Toward the middle of your third paragraph of slumber, the air changes. Clouds have opinions. The wind discovers a hobby. The lantern cupboard door rattles like a loose tooth. Rain arrives not as a visitor, but as a policy. The watchman grunts, checks the drip line, moves your bundle an inch with a boot that is also a note of advice. Your gratitude is as effusive as quiet allows. He sits, the bench conspiring to turn him into an anecdote in some other traveler's story. For a while you are two people listening to water do its small braveries and its large annoyances. It's companionable as long as everyone remembers to be slightly bored. Mainstream fact brings the ledger back out. Many towns controlled the night with more than gates, patrols on wall walks, sergeants of the watch with authority to compel assistance, and in some places a curfew bell that moved with the season, later in summer, earlier in winter. When gates opened again at dawn, the town inhaled. Peasants with produce, artisans with apprentices, that one man who believes whistling improves the taste of his morning. Quirky tidbit stands in the doorway with a grin. Some gatehouses doubled as tiny museums of confiscated weirdness, illegal weights, gambling dice, with more opinions than mathematics, and once in a while a fish that delighted no one and baffled everyone. Historians still argue whether walls and gates in later medieval towns were primarily defensive in a military sense or economic in a fiscal sense, controlling trade and taxation more than repelling armies. The answer shifts with century, region, and the size of the toll book. You drift again, and this time the dream cooperates. You are a key that refuses melodrama and fits where it's told. The world resolves into satisfying clicks. Even your knees have positive feedback. Before dawn, a cart arrives with a barrel that breathes. The watchman enters into an ancient dialogue with it, involving a dipstick, a sniff, and the word honest, pronounced as if it were the name of an old friend who sometimes lies. Arrangements are made. You make yourself useful by being very slightly less asleep, so that when the gate creaks upward on its ratcheting ropes at first light, you manage to relocate your feet before they become collectible. Dawn is the town's apology for night. The gate wakes with muscle memory, the bar lifts, the hinges perform a concerto in minor key. People sprout from alleys like daisies with plans. The watchman's face loses some of its nocturnal guard, and gains the softness of a person assured that the worst 3 possibilities did not happen. He gives you the kind of nod that means we both did our jobs. You stand, fold your cloak with respect for its extra miles, and make the gatehouse look as if nobody ever slept in it, which is both fiction and etiquette. On mornings when you were refused and slept by the bridge, you make the same ritual with different props. You shake out a bit of damp that thinks it might like to stick around. You thank the arch you borrowed for not dropping water in its enthusiasm. You eye the fishy smell with forgiveness, because rivers cannot help being thorough. On mornings when the shrine was your canopy, you straighten the little votive shelf with fingers that know the price of being a guest.
The shrine stares past you at the horizon, which is a flattering gesture in a world that often stares directly at your shoes. There are seasons to gates, and you learn them the way farmers learn clouds. In winter, curfew rings earlier, and the watchman's breath writes a small essay you can read from your bench. In summer, the gate seems almost casual, as if someone left the day on the counter and it went slightly warm. In feast weeks, the gate is a conductor with too many instruments, and not enough hands. Latecomers arrive in moods, and the watch collects stories for the price of not writing them down. Your favorite season, if pressed, is any one where the wind chooses to be a background character. Sometimes charity sneaks in by the back door of the gatehouse. A woman carrying a child who is inadequately impressed by the concept of sleep appears after the bell. The watch makes a noise that means rules and then makes another noise that means exceptions, and the two noises cancel into a room near a brazier. You observe the math of mercy and come out better at counting. Another night, a pilgrim late from a river crossing jingles with small badges and presents a document written in the universal language of convincing seals. Papers are examined, sighs exchanged, and the pilgrim sleeps under your arch with a devotion that would impress a roof. Joke forewarms itself on these little dramas. You decide the gate is the town's eyebrow. When it goes up, the whole face changes. When it lowers, everyone has to earn their verbs. Now and then you are invited inside after all, which is rarer, and therefore bright. The watchman mutters something about thieves hating rain more than honest folk, and the portcullis lifts just enough for a person to become a moral lesson about crouching. You pass under, and the gate becomes ceiling. Inside smells different, more cabbage, less syntax. The inner gatehouse room has a bench cleared by the kind of generosity that is graceless because it cannot afford grace. You sleep near shelves of things that might be important if someone could remember which. They are covered with the lint that collects on civic duties. Mourning in this scenario includes the small embarrassment of returning to the outside as if you were a letter admitted for overnight sorting. Mainstream fact keeps us grounded in many towns. The authority of the watch extended to arrest detention until morning, and the levying of small fines for rule violations. Night walking without a light, bearing weapons beyond legal length, making a nuisance of a song. Gatehouses could have small lockups. Sometimes all a man needed to do to see one was to demand to see one. Quirky tidbit jingles in with keys. Certain cities gave night officers distinctive staffs or badges that were as much props as power, and in at least a few places, the staff doubled as a measuring stick to test the legality of knife blades. A bureaucrat's dream of combining theatre and ruler. Historians still argue whether the night watch deterred wrongdoing or merely redistributed it, whether darkness held more crime or simply more invisibility, and whether people slept tighter because of the watch or because of the habit of believing in it. By your 20th gate, you can identify a town's personality by the texture of its arch. This one, smooth from carts and centuries, has a memory you could skate on. That one, rough pocked with old repairs, tells you the town used to worry about different things. Some gates hide inscriptions, dates somebody decided were a kind of brag. Some have iron studs that look like punctuation arguing with grammar. Once you see a carved face tucked high in a corbel, tongue out, a medieval emoji that laughs in stone, and you feel better about your own choices than you probably deserve. You practice politeness until it becomes a reflex rather than a performance. You never sleep right in the spout of the arch. Water has right of way. You never block the sweep of the portcullis. Iron also has rights. You keep your belongings compressed into a single idea. You learn to make your voice weigh less than the lantern. If the watchman says he had a cousin eaten by paperwork, you believe him and offer condolences. There are bad nights. It would be negligent not to admit them. A storm out of the north decides that your corner is an affront to meteorology. The rain comes sideways with career goals. You manage to be the driest wet person alive, which is admittedly a medal you would not have trained for. A drunk decides to practice dialectics with your staff. You demonstrate the pedantic efficacy of moving 2 paces and letting gravity do the explaining. A rat inspects your boot with a professional curiosity you admire but do not encourage. You do not sleep much, and when you do, you dream of dry vowels. But mostly the gate is not an enemy. It is a choreographed pause, a practice run for tomorrow's courtesy. It teaches you how to fold yourself into human spaces without making them smaller. It teaches you how to ask with posture rather than with words. It teaches you that town and traveler share a single engineering problem, how to get through the night without becoming the kind of story that has witnesses. You start keeping a mental notebook of perfect noises. The latch thrown back for the baker. The small smug chuckle the portcullis makes when it discovers it can still be lifted. The way the lantern coughs once before deciding to cooperate. The watchman's boots adjusting to the flagstone's mood. These are the bedtime sounds of stone and law. You like them better than lullabies because they never ask you to sing. And then there is dawn, the uncurfew. The bell's first morning note is a polite eviction. Carts that dreamed of movement wake happy. Someone sweeps, and the bristles write early news. You stand, stretch the exact amount that does not imply ownership, and reclaim the road, which is relieved to have something to do again. The gate becomes a throat, and you pass through it like a vowel. Inside, bread will soon pretend to be an unremarkable miracle. Outside, you resume your private career of putting one foot in front of the other until mercifully a bed appears and pretends to be inevitable. Before you go, you thank the watchman in the currency he accepts: a nod, the absence of trouble, a small compliment to the efficiency of his hinge. Joke 5 cashes out on the threshold. You tell the gate it was an excellent host and that you have left a glowing review, 5 stars for structural integrity, 4 for ambiance, deducted for the rat with managerial ambitions. The gate, fierce and dignified, does not reply. But the stone feels warmer for the politeness you've pressed into it, and you carry that warmth into the morning like a coin that spends well in places that do not know your name. And if tonight you arrive late again at some other town with its own eyebrows and habits, you will repeat the ritual with the comforting accuracy of a bedtime prayer. Hands visible, voice soft, plan clear. Ask for the bench under the arch if you must. Ask for the underarch outside if you must. Ask for the bridge if you must. Curfew is only the town's way of telling its children to behave. You not a child of this town, but not an enemy either. Promise you'll behave very quietly. The watchman checks your face, finds in it a person shaped like tomorrow, and you become for a few hours a punctuation mark in the gate's long sentence about safety and sleep. So you sleep there, in the elbow of the wall, under the strict mercy of architecture, held by a grid of iron shadows, and the persistent belief that morning is a fact and not merely an argument the sky has with itself. You curl, you breathe, you become the sort of almost invisible guest who leaves walls in better moods than when he found them. And when morning pulls the city open like a drawer, you step into it with the composure of someone who knows that civility is a blanket, and that sometimes the blankest sky is roof enough when shared with an arch that remembers your patience.
Wayside shrines and pilgrim hostels. You walk until the road forgets to be busy and remembers. It is only a line draped over fields. Hedgerows step back. The sky takes off its hat. The wind, which has been talking all afternoon, switches to an indoor voice. That's when you see it. A little roof on legs, a wooden cap the size of a generous hat, sheltering a painted figure whose eyes look past your shoulder toward whatever you're running late for. The wayside shrine stands at the bend like a courteous pause. A niche holds the saint. A shelf holds the wax offerings. A bench, not quite a bench, more a suggestion, holds you. You stop because shrines are where walking learns to take a breath. There is the faint honeyed ghost of candles, and the sharper greener note of herbs that someone tucked in last market day. The paint on the saint's mantle is chipped in all the places faith likes to touch. You put your hand on the wood and feel the day drain like water from a bucket. You don't pray loudly. You don't even say words. You just allow the world to have a center for a minute, and allow yourself to stand in the vicinity of it. The shrine is small shelter as a philosophy. It refuses to be a house. It refuses to be nothing. A sloping roof with ambitiously carved eaves keeps off direct rain. A plank smoothed by 1,000 polite backsides invites the particular kind of sitting that means only a moment. A tin cup hangs by a peg. You check because sometimes a cup means a spring. There is 20 paces away. a square of clear water bound by stones, a holy well that the local hedgehogs respect more than most people. You kneel by it, sip, and decide that the well is in fact the second best bed you'll meet tonight. It is the bed your bones make on the inside. The light swings lower. You will need an actual place to collapse, yes. But shrines let you practice in miniature. You angle yourself so the little roof throws you a triangle of shadow and you become smaller under it, without shrinking your dignity. A cart passes, the sound of a small economy rolling, and the driver lifts his fingers in a half salute that says, "Good choice," because everyone understands the grammar of these structures. A roof is a comma, a saint is a semicolon. You pausing are the sentence trying to be patient. Joke one elbows in with its slippers on. You consider leaving a review. Charming roadside chapel. Excellent air, seating firm, staff silent but attentive. But the saint's painted eyelids discourage ratings. Mainstream fact wanders up calmly with a bundle of evidence and a ribbon, across much of medieval and early modern Europe, wayside shrines, wooden or stone, roofed niches, crosses on pedestals, holy wells with little houses over them, dot the roads like punctuation. They mark parish boundaries, dangerous bends, memories of accidents or narrow salvations. They act as navigational beacons long before anyone agrees on what north should be. Many are raised by guilds, confraternities, or families who promised a tangible gratitude, and then kept it with carpentry. Quirky tidbit jingles from a nail. At more popular shrines, wax votives shaped like hands, legs, hearts and whole infants hang like a busy anatomy lesson. The gallery of ailments and hopes here and there. A little lead badge glints among the wax. Tin saints that double as souvenirs and identity documents for travelers, bragging softly about where they've been. Historians still argue whether the roadside shrines served primarily as lay devotional markers for everyday piety, or as semi-official safety features, sanctuary-adjacent posts where violence hesitates and hospitality remembers its manners. You lean back and let the shrine do its quieting work. A small bunch of rosemary tucked into a crack whispers resin, and you think about all the fingers that made that smell happen here. Crickets tune themselves. A bird announces an opinion and then edits it. This is not a bed. You tell your legs. Your legs answer that they've heard worse beds than this bench, and would vote to stay. You compromise with a few more minutes, and the solemn promise of better straw later. The road resumes. You take the saint's permission and turn it into forward motion. Hedges reappear. A rabbit considers capitalism and rejects it. At the next crossroad, a taller shrine stands, stone this time, with a weathered relief of a woman carrying a castle in her hand, which feels both allegorical and practical. You decide she is a local patron of not getting lost. Under the lip of the roof, remnant candle stubs line up like teeth. An alms slot shines at the edges from honest handling. You put in a coin, small enough to be generous and large enough to be felt. Generosity is not measured by arithmetic, but arithmetic does have a way of walking alongside generosity and humming approvingly. Past the shrine is a cluster of cottages, and then at last, the thing your day has been courting, a pilgrim hostel. The sign swings, saint's name weathered into a friendly blur. The door is wide with purpose. A window leaks light the color of soup just beginning to be interesting. You step in, and the world shifts from road grammar to house grammar. Rules, ladles, hearts that know how to be quiet. A hospitaller, aproned unflustered, looks you over. Not suspicious, just practical. The way people look at flour to see if it'll take water well. You present yourself for admission to the evening with all the humility of someone already halfway asleep. He asks you the basics, where you started today, where you aim tomorrow, whether your boots have learned to be social. You answer in calm syllables. He nods in the dialect of yes, but also here are the rules, which to someone tired, is the mother tongue of comfort. You are given a place, straw tick in a row of other straw ticks, a corner where a peg believes your cloak to be briefly interesting. Mainstream fact lights a candle, and places it safely far from the straw across pilgrimage routes, toward Compostela, Rome, Canterbury, Cologne, Jerusalem hostels and hospitals, Hotel Dieu, Maison Dieu, Hospitium, Cenodocium, shelter travelers for a night or two. Food simple and sufficient. Bedding practical, care for the sick serious. Monastic houses, confraternities, municipal endowments, guilds and private donors, keep these doors oiled. Rules differ by charter, but the bones rhyme. Quiet at dark, no fighting, no fires, where straw can get ideas, early bell for prayers and departure. Quirky tidbit tiptoes in with a tray. Some places hand out little wooden or lead tokens stamped with the house mark, spendable only inside, redeemable for a bowl or a bed. A system designed to prevent double dipping, and to make the gift visible to the accountant gods who love ledgers more than sleep. Historians still argue whether most medieval pilgrims travelled primarily for piety or folded trade, tourism, and social mobility into their devotions. It's probably all of the above, with the ratio flavoured by season purse, and whether cousin Allard promised to buy your wool, if you only fetched him a badge from Canterbury. You eat the hostel's evening like a lesson you already knew. A ladle delivers a portion of stew that has spent time considering its ingredients. A heel of bread thumps your bowl with the discreet confidence of someone's morning labour. The room smells like onions that will remember you kindly, and like bodies grateful for ceilings. You find your corner of straw, and with the practiced care of people who share air, you arrange yourself into an effort not to rustle too loudly. Joke 2 stretches and grins. You decide to call this place the Snoring Museum. Open late, free admission, exhibitions change nightly. The audio guide provided by everyone. The hostel teaches you rules without writing them down. Beds face the same way, so that the eyes don't have to think too much. Boots face out for fast exits when dawn forgets itself and leaps. Voices drop after the second candle is pinched. A sister glides the floor with a broom that knows where crumbs hide. She places a small cup by each pallet. A night draught, weak ale that proves liquid can be both humble and heroic. You sip and let your bones quit the committee meeting they've held since noon. You know sleep will not be one continuous ribbon. It rarely is here. You drift down. You rise to the surface long enough to hear someone's prayer slip awake and lie back down. A cough measures time, then stops out of politeness. Dreams arrive as courteous visitors who leave before crowding. Between the first and second sleeps you sit up, sip again, and marvel at how warm straw becomes when it befriends you. In the grey approachable hour, the hospitaller lights a lamp that does not insult the dark. A bell tinks, bodies remember they have spines and behave accordingly. There is a bowl to rinse, a corner to sweep, a bench to re-straighten. Chores are not exacted so much as offered, and you pay them gladly. The small coin of belonging. A list comes out, names you will never see again collected into a single morning. Your own jumps to the page as if it has been practicing. On the wall hangs a map drawn in a cartography of sentences. To the ridge where the 3 oaks debate the wind, then follow the ditch like a polite argument, until a white stone thinks it is a sheep. The hospitaller adds a note in his own dialect. Avoid the lower ford unless you enjoy socks with hobbies. You memorize direction the way you memorize kindness, with your feet as much as your head. You set out lighter. Sleep earned indoors subtracts from gravity. The next shrine arrives on cue by a crossroads smudged with hoof prints. This one is plaster white, a crisp little chapel the size of a cupboard, with a door cut like a keyhole. You stoop to peer in. Inside, dried flowers keep their coloured promises. A little bell hangs from a string. The saint is a cheerful woman with a loaf in one hand, and what might be a book in the other. You leave a crumb of bread. No rule says you must, but your hands enjoy remembering last night's bread, and letting the memory find a shrine of its own. You try not to have favourites, but the shrines make it difficult. One arrives by a bridge, its roof shingled in wooden scales, its paint weathered into a temperate palette of pilgrimage chic. Another crouches near a vineyard, and smells like someone's grandmother. The holy wells have the best temperament. Stone-lined, cool, sensible, wearing their little houses like hats. You learn to look for clouties, rags tied in trees by people who asked for healing. Some are new, and some are grey with long weather. You decide not to judge how long a prayer wears its coat. Mainstream fact sits down on the shrine's bench like it has always known where to put its elbows. Holy wells and spring houses, often dedicated to local saints,
dot the British Isles and parts of the continent, places where healing is asked for, and sometimes robustly testified to by crutches hung up, and wax limbs left in thanks. Many wayside chapels have hagioscopes, or squints, odd little openings that let glances slip in to touch the altar, or out to the road, depending on how the building prefers to breathe. Quirky tidbit, lights a tiny lantern. In parts of France, lanterns of the dead, slender pierced towers, glow near cemeteries and chapels, practical in their day and romantic now, their small lights tutoring the night. Elsewhere, bridge chapels perched over water, keep a box for the Bridge Brotherhood, that raises funds in the honourable tradition of people who look at stone and say, let's keep it not drowning. Historians still argue whether ex-votos and rag trees represent a seamless Christian continuation of earlier practices, or a parallel kindness of custom, that the church shepherded, tolerated, or on certain Tuesdays frowned at continuity and adaptation braid like rushes, hard to pull apart without breaking something that ought to stay woven. You pass a hermitage with smoke that refuses to brag. The hermit, who has an excellent beard and an even better sense of boundaries, sits outside mending a net that might never touch water. He nods once, which is a whole conversation in the hermit dialect. A bench near his door carries a carved word, Pax, and the bench takes its own advice. You grant yourself a sit, the kind that counts as prayer, because nothing else is involved. Now the mountain arrives. Not a dramatic mountain, not the kind that hires trumpets but a pass with aspirations. The road narrows, lifts, insists on lungs that did their homework. The weather remembers unsent letters. At the crest, just where the wind becomes ambitious, stands a hospice with shoulders broad enough to catch snow's lecture. Stone walls shrug at storms. A chapel squints into the weather, like a friend squints at a joke to make sure it is allowed. Inside is the exact opposite of outside. Warm-ordered, woolly with voices that don't need to be large. Canons move like people who have replaced their bones with routines. You are handed not quite a bowl, not quite a cup, something that agrees to carry hot liquid to your face. It smells of whatever herb grows under stones. Your hands rediscover the word gratitude and write it down repeatedly. Mainstream fact unwraps itself beside the brazier. High passes in the Alps and elsewhere sprout hospices from the 11th century onward, famously at the Great St. Bernard Pass, founded by canons regular to rescue and lodge travellers in weather that enjoys a surprise. Bells, poles and human patrols guide people who didn't plan on learning the geography of white. The dogs you've heard about, they become famous helpers centuries later. For now it's monks and men and the stubborn charity of soup. Quirky tidbit, warms itself and grins. Some hospices keep long horns for storm signals that sound like a giant arguing with the sky. Others lay out boards painted black for visibility when the world goes white. Early user experience design, Alpine edition. Historians still argue whether these mountain houses primarily saved souls by saving bodies, or mainly offered ecclesiastical bragging rights on strategic routes, piety, publicity, and geopolitics. It turns out, can all share a bowl if the soup is hot enough. You sleep there like someone turning into a story. Straw disciplined into mattresses, blankets that smell like previous winters, a roof that believes in its own job. The rule here is early, and early you obey. Mountain dawns begin as drafts and end as hymns. At first light, a canon stands by a list and checks off letters that resemble names. Bread thumps the table in generous shards. A map is sketched with a piece of charcoal on that part of the wall that has decided to be the blackboard. You are warned about a cornice that lies like a politician, about a gullied slope that collects the unwary like a hobby. You promise to behave. Descending, you think about hostels lower down that smell less of snow and more of towns. The maison d'eau built by a river, its hall long as a parish gossip, beds by the dozen. Nurses with hands that respect fever and not nonsense. In one they call the sick, our lords, which is either extravagant or simply accurate when you consider how many saints hid inside the poor, before anyone had the sense to notice. You pass too the smaller, more conversational places, a cell of Augustinian canonesses, who once were noble daughters and now are experts in broth. a guild hospice where the shoemakers provide a whole shelf of spare sandals because they live for the pun of saving souls. You hear rumors. In the same way bread hears rumors about butter of the Order of St. John the Hospitallers, whose houses stand like punctuations on the road toward ports and ships, and the wide idea of Jerusalem. In market towns their commanderies keep rooms for pilgrims, and their rule, written with the seriousness of people who have seen what sickness does, insists that the poor be served with silver dishes, as if each one were Christ at table. You picture the dish, the reflection of an exhausted face made fancy by accident, and decide this is a theology you understand without footnotes. Joke 3 scuffs in politely. You imagine a guidebook titled Hostels of the Saints, complete with a symbol key. 1 scallop shell means bring earplugs. 3 means they wash the bowls between uses, and a little bell icon means expect someone to gently disapprove of your shoes. Evening brings you to another shrine, and there the mood is festival adjacent. A small lantern glows like a secret discovered, and then decided to be shared. A boy has set up a basket of flat cakes nearby, and does not mind if you think this is Comus's idea of devotion. Both are technically true. You buy 2 because you are devout in matters of cake. A woman pins a small badge to your cloak, uninvited. Lead tin alloy stamped with the local saint. A souvenir and a statement, and you accept the gift because it is partly tax, partly geometry. This is how towns keep their circles from unraveling. Mainstream fact flickers in the lantern's skirt. Pilgrim badges are a whole economy. You can hear rattling. Canterbury ampulla shaped like little flasks once brimming with Thomas water. The scallop shell of Compostela, adopted by people who wanted their identities to be both portable and hard to counterfeit. Badges for Rocamadour, Cologne Walsingen, Rome, pewter rain on pilgrims' cloaks, a bibliography of feet. Quirky tidbit, leans over the table. Some towns find fakers, who sold fake badges, not because fakery was new, but because tax collection hates competition. Elsewhere wardens blessed the badges in batches, effectively turning a souvenir into a low-cost miracle. Historians still argue whether badges functioned mainly as passports, visual proof of status that opened doors and hostels, or as mementos and modest insurance policies against uncertainty. It's likely they were both, depending on who looked and how much trouble he was trying to avoid. You sleep that night in a pilgrim house maintained by a parish fraternity. The building pretends not to be old, the way old things like to pretend youth before bed. Inside the floor is strewn with rushes braided with sweet woodruff. It smells like fields on good behavior. 2 bedesmen, blue-gowned regulars of the place, help set pallets in a row. Their movements are choreography of kindness that is halfway between liturgy and well-practiced domesticity. They know exactly how tired you are, because they have spent decades perfecting the art of identifying tiredness by the angle of a boot. Matins is a rumor, then a certainty. Not everyone rises. Not everyone must. The small chapel off the hall holds 5 voices, not expertly, but earnestly. You listen from your pallet with the kind of attention that counts as joining. You doze again, and your dreams fill with processions you never made and will never need to. It is enough that such processions exist somewhere in the world, tidying the edges of human time. Dawn boasts gently. The fraternity feeds you again, because hospitality is a habit that improves with repetition. A ledger appears, the book that loves you without knowing you, and a warden records the facts. Day, name, destination, bowl, bed. Ink is a kind of prayer here, the kind that keeps roofs up and bean fields planted. You sign or make a mark. You practice gratitude in your best handwriting. You walk a stretch with company, 2 pilgrims from far places who have collected vowels in their pockets. You compare badges and blisters, recipes and rumors, safe wells and honest bakers. You share that tiny silly joy of finding you all have met the same dog in 3 different towns. Does the dog work for the shrines? You wonder. The dog almost definitely runs the whole route. At a crossroads marked by a wayside cross and an oak with opinions, a small man with a portable altar sets up a stall of blessings. He sells nothing. He is an advertisement for hope. You invest. It pays out 1 steady breath after another for the remainder of the day, plus interest in the form of not thinking about rain. Rush. Joke 4 pays for itself by existing. You consider forming a cooperative of pilgrims to rank roadside sermons by the quality of their metaphors. You realize you are not qualified to chair the committee and decide to specialize in nodding. The road leans toward water. Ferrymen have their own vexations and their own shrines. A post by the landing carries a rough image of Saint Nicholas, partial to sailors and unlucky children, and people whose pockets need advice. A tin box is nailed nearby. You put in a coin and receive, in exchange, a boat that does not make you a better person, but does make you a drier one. On the far bank is another hostel, run by people who embrace the ferry schedule as a spiritual discipline. Here the rules are posted on a board in the kind of handwriting that forgives no one. 2 nights quiet, no fire on pallet, wash bowl, be kind, be gone by bell. You love rules written by people who understand why rules are good at night, but silly in the morning. You obey, which is easy when the soup performs miracles of arithmetic. It looks like it will feed none and feeds all. Mainstream fact brings us back to the ledger corner. Many hostels couple hospitality with record keeping, and expect a small service in return. Road repair, vegetable peeling, a morning sweep. Endowments specify the number of beds, sometimes classed by category: poor sick, poor wayfarer, pilgrims identifiable by badge. Some houses are gendered, some in emergencies are practical. All lean toward the idea that the night is shorter when people are useful. Quirky tidbit hums along. Certain confraternities hand out strings of wooden beads, counting aids for psalms or just something for restless hands, and in a pinch these double as door signals. A bead tied to a latch tells the next arriving stranger, this corner is kindness. Try inside first. Historians still argue whether the increasing formalization of poor relief and parish responsibility in the 16th-17th centuries tightened the hoop around mobility, requiring settlement certificates, preferring locals to strangers, and turning pilgrims into problems on ledgers, or whether the old custom of hospitality stubbornly persisted under new paperwork. As usual, both versions manage to exist in the same century without fighting to the death. You do the little chore. Assigned refill the water barrel from the clean side of the stream, which has a personality any collector would appreciate. The bucket weights your arm into the honest ache that proves you belong to the species of helpers. The sister in charge of ladles sneaks you an extra scrape of something oniony and refuses thanks in a tone that collects unseen interest. Night there is the particular silence of buildings near water, a hush with a pulse. From your pallet you can hear the river think. You sleep the way hedgerows sleep, tidily, grateful to have a boundary. In the second sleep intermission, you sit up just enough to notice the moon has hung a silver badge over the shrine outside. You consider applying for membership in people momentarily overwhelmed by simple beauty, then realize the dues are paid in attention, and you are already current. Days fold, shrines lead you like breadcrumbs strategically spared from soup. Hostels catch you like baskets held by saints. You collect micro-rituals as you go, touch the door jamb with 2 fingers, and vow to say something kind before night. Leave a crumb by the well for birds who volunteer as therapists. Untie your boots as if they too had done a day's work and deserve to be noticed. Joke 5 keeps morale high. You begin telling your feet bedtime stories. Once upon a time, a perfectly flat road existed, and your feet, skeptics but not cynics, reward you by not quitting. You pass a bridge chapel, where a brother keeps a lamp going for the sake of accuracy. He tells you, in the confiding tone of people who live where wind considers getting a degree, that last winter they strung bells across the path so that snow, which hears nothing, might hear something. You picture the bells making a livable line through weather, and you think that is all a hostel is in the end, a bell line through the dark. You sleep one night at a maison Dieu, built on the legacy of a merchant who got caught in a storm, and decided to defeat weather with generosity. The hall's timbers are a sermon without words. The rule about fleas is more aspirational than achieved, but the beds are clean enough to salute. A woman in a blue gown, the uniform of a bateswoman, counts spoons with the gravity of a steward of an empire. She reminds you of 100 aunts you never had, and therefore trust at once. Next day, another holy well waits in a copse, and the shrine above it wears fresh greenery. because some saint's day is flirting with the calendar. Children tie ribbons with the solemn pride of diplomats. You tie a scrap the size of a thought, and do not ask for anything in particular. You just ask to keep understanding what roofs are for. You approach a city famous for bones that shimmer with a reputation. The pilgrim quarter hums like a hive, but tries to seal the honey from spilling. Hostels here are crowded. You squeeze into one, count the breaths you will have to ignore to become a good neighbor, and decide to succeed. The bad shops clink with tin hope. A clerk at a counter stamps parchment with a seal that looks like a saint riding a horse that looks like a proverb. You see travelers who have come further than your imagination can conveniently measure, and travelers who have come from 3 parishes away and are no less sincere. Everyone acts like time is cooperating. By now, the shrines have turned from scenery into friends. You greet them as if they were staff posted along your route to make sure your mood does not quit. You have learned where to sit so as not to block the prayer of a person shorter than you. You have learned that a coin placed early in the day buys you different thoughts later. You have learned that gratitude can be counted by the number of times you stop and exhale with purpose. The road home is never simply the road out in reverse. It is a correspondingly different animal, and it wants different food. You give it shrines, and it purrs. You give it hostels, and it unclenches. You keep your badge where passing eyes can see it, not to invite envy, but to prevent administrative tedium. A guard who has decided to be difficult finds himself bored by your impeccable tin resume. You sleep under a saint's wooden cap again, and think perhaps saints invented architecture by accident. When weather sulks, you aim for place names that sound friendly. Our Lady of the Wayside is never wrong. Maison du Lane is either a promise or a very wicked joke. Tonight it is the former. Inside, a new hospitaller with a young beard overcompensates with paperwork. You forgive him because he is building the muscle of mercy in his own clumsy way. You help fold blankets in the morning and watch his shoulders learn what authority feels like when it chooses not to be loud. You keep moving because movement is how the story works. Shrine, field, town, shrine, hedge, hostel, river, shrine, inn-hill, shrine, hamlet, hospice. You keep sleeping because sleep is the set of commas that turn road into sentence. You keep laughing gently at how serious you can be about the important business of lying down. You keep thanking structures and people, and small icons painted last century by hands who had no idea you would ever be here, touching their work with your modern muddy fingers. Where do you sleep when roofs are scarce, and people are busy being alive? Under the little hats of roadside saints, where the weather is negotiated down to a drizzle, and your day learns to breathe out. In halls maintained by the stubborn kindness of confraternities and canons and biddersfolk, and anonymous merchants who decided the cost of saving a night was always lower than the cost of losing one. In mountain houses that teach soup to be a sacrament, in rooms where badges jingle, and ledgers purr and rules are just ways of saying, we will care for you if you will help us care for everyone. You sleep in systems humans built to turn fear into routine and routine into rest. Tonight you add one more night to that system. You sit on a shrine's plank, or a hostel's pallet, or a hospice bench that pretends to be a friend, and you let the day remedy you. You lay your staff in the approved position. You fold your cloak like a treaty between you and the floor. You trust the saint to keep watch, and the hospitaller to keep count. You close your eyes and fall, not like a stone, but like a favor returned.